The chosen one. The storm raged inside you, a battle between belief and exhaustion. The voice that once felt divine now echoed as a question you could no longer answer. You stood in silence, trembling not from fear, but from recognition. You knew this moment would define everything: your path, your faith, your becoming. They told you being chosen was a blessing. They never said it would cost you your peace. Every gift came wrapped in isolation, every revelation shadowed by loss. You learned early that purpose was not a promise of comfort, but a contract with fire. The light within you did not make life easier. It made truth unavoidable. You walk through rooms and feel the air bend. Conversations shift when you enter. People laugh a little louder, speak a little faster, as if something in your stillness exposes what they try to hide. You never asked for that power. You only wanted to understand why your presence unsettles those who claim to love the light. You used to think maybe it was your fault. Maybe you were too intense, too silent, too awake. But now you realize it wasn't about arrogance. It was about alignment. You were never meant to blend in because your energy wasn't created for comfort. It was designed for awakening. Every eye that avoids yours is a soul that's not yet ready to see itself. You carry a frequency born from what you survived. The nights you cried and still rose. The betrayals that hollowed you but didn't destroy you. Each wound became a tuning fork for something higher. And now, whether you speak or stay silent, your energy speaks louder than any word could. Some call you intimidating, others call you mysterious. But you know what? You are truth in motion. The kind that doesn't need applause, the kind that doesn't need to be understood. And yet, even as you walk with purpose, you still question. You still ask the sky why your calling must feel like a curse. Why must revelation feel like rupture? Why must divine clarity come with so much loss? Because every chosen one learns this before you can be the vessel. You must be emptied. The universe cannot fill hands still clinging to the familiar. The silence that terrifies you now is not punishment. It is calibration. You are being tuned to a higher frequency, and that process hurts. Alignment always does. You've seen what happens when people mishandle your presence. They confuse your softness for weakness, your kindness for invitation, your peace for permission. They think access to you is entitlement, not understanding it is a test. Every connection becomes spiritual currency, and those who spend it carelessly always end up bankrupt. Still, you wonder if you're being too guarded. If isolation has turned into armor, you crave connection, but fear what it will cost. You long for rest but distrust peace, because every time you've exhaled, the world has shifted beneath your feet. You begin to realize that perhaps being chosen means living in motion, always rebuilding, always remembering. But then there are moments brief, luminous, undeniable, when you feel it again. That pulse of divine intelligence moving through you. That quiet knowing that you were sent, not by accident, but by alignment. It doesn't whisper reassurance. It commands remembrance. It says, you are not here to fit in. You are here to reveal, to disrupt, to awaken. And that means being misunderstood. You close your eyes. The air feels heavy. But beneath the weight, there's something sacred, a rhythm, steady and ancient, calling you to rise. The storm outside mirrors the one within. And yet, in that chaos, there is order forming. You finally understand. The storm was never against you. It was sent to shape you. So you lift your head, not because the battle is over, but because you're done hiding from it. You are no longer the victim of your purpose. You are its embodiment. And as the first light breaks through the clouds, you hear the truth, not in words, but in vibration. You were never meant to be safe. You were meant to be seen, not by the world, but by the universe itself. If you feel this truth, hit like and subscribe, because this is only the beginning. The test has just begun. The chosen one. The night before your awakening was not quiet, it was chaos disguised as clarity. The stars above looked frozen, but everything inside you was trembling. You told yourself you were fine. You told yourself you could walk away from the calling, but the truth kept following you like a shadow that refused to disappear. There is no escape from divine recognition. Once you've heard the whisper, it haunts you until you answer. You tried to drown it out with work, with people, with noise. Yet even in the loudest moments, you could feel it breathing behind your thoughts, a voice that wasn't external, but ancient, buried within your own heartbeat. You looked at your reflection and saw the fatigue of someone who has carried light for too long without rest. You weren't afraid of the dark. You were afraid of what the light was demanding of you. Because being chosen doesn't just mean being seen, it means being stripped. Everything false must fall away before truth can wear your skin. You started noticing it again. The shift in energy when you entered a room, the unease in people who claimed to love your presence but secretly resented your calm. They didn't realize your silence wasn't weakness. It was surveillance. You weren't judging them, you were feeling them. And that kind of awareness makes liars uncomfortable. It wasn't arrogance that kept you distant, it was discernment. You learned the hard way that not every "I'm proud of you" is pure. That sometimes admiration hides envy and comfort hides control. And still, you forgave, again and again, hoping that love would heal what ego had poisoned. But heaven doesn't reward blindness. Every time you ignored the warnings, the energy around you tightened. The dreams became louder, the synchronicities sharper. The universe doesn't repeat itself for no reason. It repeats until you listen. You began to notice how people's lives shifted after meeting you. Some found clarity, peace, sudden alignment. Others fell apart, not because you cursed them, but because your energy illuminated what they refused to face. You were not their punishment, you were their mirror. And mirrors never lie. You started realizing that being chosen isn't about elevation, it's about exposure. To be chosen is to carry a frequency that amplifies everything around it. The light doesn't just reveal beauty, it exposes the cracks in the foundation. You became the confrontation no one asked for but everyone needed, and it broke you for a while. You questioned if maybe you were too harsh, too honest, too different. You wondered if the silence from those who left was your fault. But deep down, you knew they didn't leave you. They fled from the truth you carried. Faith became harder to define. It wasn't prayer anymore, it was persistence. It wasn't about believing something good would happen. It was about knowing that even in the breakdown, something sacred was being rebuilt. You stopped asking for clarity. You started asking for courage. There were nights when you stared at the ceiling, whispering, "Why me?" And in those moments, the answer was always the same, not in words, but in a pulse that moved through your bones. Because you can bear it, because others can't. That truth didn't comfort you, it weighed on you. But somewhere between the tears and the surrender, you stopped running. You started rising, and when you did, the world shifted again. People who once doubted you began to feel drawn to you without understanding why. The same ones who mocked your silence now craved your presence, but you had changed. You were no longer seeking validation. You had become validation itself. You started walking differently, not with pride, but with purpose. Your steps carried intention. Your words carried gravity. You realized your presence was a frequency that didn't ask to be heard. It demanded to be felt. You didn't have to prove you were chosen anymore. The evidence was in your resilience, in the peace that followed every storm, in the way the universe rearranged itself to protect your purpose. And yet, A deeper challenge loomed, because once you understand your power, the test shifts. The question becomes, will you still stay humble when heaven hands you authority? Will you use your energy to elevate or to escape? You stand at the threshold of that question now. The next door will not open through effort, but through alignment. The next chapter is not about who hurt you, it's about who you will heal. The world is watching, the unseen is waiting. The storm inside you is no longer destruction, it's becoming direction. Write 333 inches the comments. It's a prophetic sign of your divine alignment, because what's coming next will reveal why you were chosen at all. The chosen one. This time, the silence felt heavier than sound. You could sense a shift in the air, an invisible line being drawn between who you were and who you were becoming. It wasn't just change, it was initiation. The kind of transformation that doesn't ask for permission, only surrender. You stood at the edge of yourself, torn between fear and faith. Everything familiar was dissolving: the people, the plans, even the parts of you that once felt safe. You thought the storm was over, but now you see it was only the beginning, because when you are chosen, endings come disguised as beginnings, and destruction becomes the language of renewal. You tried to hold on to the old version of you, the one who wanted peace without purpose, validation without vulnerability. But the universe had already decided that version was too small for what was coming. So, it broke what you refused to release. It started with whispers, subtle losses, misunderstandings that grew into silence. One by one, the connections that once defined you began to fall away. You didn't understand it then, but now you know. Isolation is never punishment for the chosen. It's preparation. When the noise fades, the truth becomes deafening. In that stillness, you began to see the patterns, the people who came to drain, not to give. The places where you kept shrinking just to be accepted. The versions of love that demanded your light but never offered reflection. You had confused sacrifice with purpose. But there's a difference. Purpose requires alignment, not self-erasure. And in that clarity, you wept not because you were weak, but because you were waking up. You realized how long you had been carrying others' fears as if they were your own. How often you dimmed your power just to make others comfortable in their shadows. But awakening always comes with grief. You don't just lose people, you lose the illusions they represented. You mourn not what was real, but what you hoped would be. And that mourning, painful as it was, became your portal to something higher. The calling grew louder. It wasn't a voice anymore, it was energy, pressing against your chest, pulling you towards something unseen. You began to sense when doors were closing for your protection, not your punishment. You began to trust the silence as much as the signs. You started walking differently, not toward outcomes, but toward alignment. You didn't chase anymore. You attracted, because once you stand in your truth, everything not meant for you falls away on its own. But with awakening came resistance. The world doesn't always welcome those who remember who they are. Old friends started to look at you differently. Some called you distant. Others said you'd changed. They were right, you had. You were no longer playing roles in stories that weren't written for your soul. And it hurt to be misunderstood, to be misjudged for choosing peace over performance. But deep within, a knowing anchored you. Those who cannot understand your evolution were never meant to witness your elevation. You began to sense divine protection in motion. Conversations that didn't happen, trips that got cancelled, relationships that ended abruptly, all were invisible interventions. You thought you were being rejected, but heaven was rerouting you. Then came the test. The moment where doubt crept in again. The blessings slowed. The silence returned. You began to wonder if you had misheard the call, if maybe the voice wasn't divine but delusion. But every time you tried to go back to the old path, doors slammed shut in your face. You couldn't return, no matter how much you wanted to. That's when you learned the truth. When you are chosen, you can't go back. You can only grow forward. Faith, now, was no longer about believing. It was about remembering. Remembering who you are when everything else is stripped away. Remembering that your power was never in what you had, it was in what you endured. You looked around and realized something profound. The same people who once overlooked you were now looking for you. The same ones who dismissed your depth were now drowning in their own shallowness. You didn't seek revenge. You didn't need to. Alignment handled what ego could not. You understood now. Your presence is medicine for some and mirror for others. You were not sent to please, you were sent to provoke healing. And healing always comes with resistance. That's why your light disturbs the darkness. That's why your calm rattles the chaos. That's why your truth feels dangerous to those still living in denial. You are not here to be liked. You are here to awaken. And as you breathe that truth in, the fear starts to fade. You realize you no longer need to be understood. You just need to be. Because real alignment doesn't need an audience. It creates its own echo. So tonight, when the doubts return, remember this. You are not breaking down. You are breaking open. The same fire that once consumed you is now lighting your way. And the world, though it doesn't know it yet, is about to see what happens when a soul finally remembers its purpose. If you feel that shift, if something in your spirit just whispered, yes, write 333 inches the comments. It's your sign that the next chapter of your awakening has already begun. The chosen one. The morning came without sound. The air was heavy with unseen intention. You woke not from sleep, but from illusion. Something inside you had shifted, and though you couldn't name it, you could feel it pulsing beneath your skin, a strange mix of sorrow and certainty, the kind that follows revelation. You rose slowly, as if the ground itself might whisper another instruction. For days the signs had been relentless, the clock stopping at mirrored numbers, the same song playing wherever you went. The dreams repeating symbols you didn't yet understand. You had learned long ago that coincidence was heaven's camouflage. But this time, the message felt urgent. You are being prepared. That's what the silence said. Not punished. Prepared. Still, the preparation didn't look like promise. It looked like loss. People you trusted began to fall away again, not with drama, but with distance. Conversations ended mid-sentence. Energy shifted mid-smile. It was as though the universe itself was pruning your path, trimming anything that could not walk where you were going. And, though your mind fought it, your spirit knew the truth. Elevation requires elimination. You walked outside and felt it, the tension between worlds. The one you were leaving and the one calling your name. You could no longer find comfort in the familiar, but you hadn't yet found peace in the unknown. That's the part of awakening no one tells you about. The in-between, the emptiness, the silence after surrender. You sat in that silence for hours, trying to make sense of it. But faith doesn't speak in explanations. It speaks in echoes. And the echo that found you whispered, "Stop looking for signs. Become one." The words broke you open. You realized you had been waiting for permission to step into what was already yours. You wanted confirmation, validation, clarity. But purpose doesn't need an audience to begin. It needs obedience. So you began to listen differently, not to noise, but to energy, not to people's words, but their vibrations. And what you heard frightened you. So many voices spoke of love, but carried fear. So many offered friendship, but demanded fragments. You could no longer ignore it. Being chosen meant being selective, not from pride, but from protection. Your boundaries became holy. You stopped explaining your silence, stopped apologizing for your absence. You began to understand that solitude wasn't loneliness, it was strategy. Every time you withdrew, something inside you expanded. Every no became a doorway to deeper power. The more you honored your peace, the more the world began to react. Some called you distant, others accused you of arrogance. But you knew better. When light stops feeding shadows, the shadows start screaming. You started walking through places that once felt sacred, only to realize your energy had outgrown them. You were no longer there to learn, you were there to witness what needed to end. And though you grieved the version of yourself that tried so hard to belong, you also felt gratitude, because now you finally understood what belonging truly meant. It wasn't about fitting in, it was about alignment with truth. Then, without warning, the tests intensified. A familiar voice returned, offering you comfort dressed as compromise. An old wound resurfaced, whispering that you could rest if you just settled. You felt the pull, the ache to go back to ease, but something within you refused. You had tasted clarity, and no illusion could satisfy you again. And that's when the storm came back, not outside, but within, the kind that strips you to bone and truth. You found yourself crying without knowing why. The tears weren't sadness, they were shedding. Every drop carried the weight of a timeline that no longer fit. Every sob broke another chain of fear disguised as reason. When it ended, you didn't feel victorious. You felt emptied, hollow. But beneath that emptiness, there was stillness, a strange, unwavering peace. You realized the storm had not come to destroy, it had come to deliver. In that moment, a new awareness rose in you. You began to see energy as language, events as metaphors, pain as prophecy. You understood that being chosen meant living in translation, decoding meaning from chaos, order from loss. And though your human self still longed for rest, your spirit smiled quietly, because somewhere deep inside, you knew every ending had been rearranged in your favor. Every silence had been protection. Every delay had been divine timing disguised as denial. You looked up at the sky, now streaked with faint gold, and whispered the truth you had run from for so long. I am not waiting for a sign. I am the sign. And the wind seemed to nod in agreement. So remember this. The next time doubt creeps in, your isolation is not absence, it's incubation. You are not being hidden, you are being honed. The next version of you is already forming in the unseen, waiting for the exact moment the world needs your voice again. When that moment comes, you will not need to force it. You will simply arrive, and everything around you will rearrange itself to make space for what you carry. If your spirit just felt that resonance, if something deep inside you whispered, "This is me," write 333 inches the comments. It's your confirmation that the waiting is not wasted, because what comes after this silence will rewrite everything you thought you knew about destiny. The chosen one. The air was still, but inside you, something trembled, a pulse, a whisper, a warning. The world around you looked the same, yet every detail hummed differently. You could feel it. The shift wasn't coming. It was here, and you were the epicenter. At first, it felt like pressure, subtle but growing. Every word you spoke, every thought you entertained carried weight. Even silence had gravity. You sensed that heaven was no longer whispering, it was watching. Each decision now echoed through dimensions unseen. You weren't the same anymore. You knew too much to go back, but not enough to move forward with certainty. The old patterns called to you, sweet with familiarity, but your spirit had outgrown their flavor. Comfort now tasted like compromise. You began to feel people's intentions before they spoke. Their energy revealed more than their faces. Smiles no longer fooled you. Apologies no longer softened you. You had become fluent in vibration, and that language made deceit visible. But seeing truth isn't always liberating. Sometimes it's lonely. You started realizing how rare authenticity really is. How much of the world runs on performance, love as currency, faith as branding, peace as costume. You used to envy those who seemed happy in illusion. Now, you pity them, because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And that sight isolates you, not by choice, but by design. There were moments you questioned if enlightenment was just a poetic form of exile. Why did divine awareness feel like separation? Why did peace cost so much silence? The answer came slowly, in the rhythm of your own breath. Because sacred things can't thrive in crowded spaces. You weren't being abandoned, you were being positioned. Moved like a chess piece by hands you could not see. Every closed door wasn't rejection, it was redirection. Every delayed dream wasn't denial, it was divine architecture. You began to recognize the patterns of protection disguised as pain. The relationship that ended before you were destroyed by it. The job that fell apart before it caged your soul. The opportunity that passed before it diluted your purpose. You realized that heaven had been editing your story with precision, even when you were crying over erased paragraphs. And with that awareness came a strange strength, the kind that doesn't roar, but radiates. You stopped chasing validation because you finally understood. Alignment doesn't beg to be seen. It simply becomes undeniable. You started walking in that quiet confidence. People could feel it, though they couldn't explain it. Some admired it, others felt threatened. That's what truth does. It divides. It separates those ready to evolve from those clinging to illusion. And yet, even in your strength, the tests intensified. Old wounds resurfaced not to punish you, but to prove your healing. People from the past reappeared, their voices dripping with nostalgia, tempting you to rewrite history. You felt the pull to revert, to shrink, to forget. But a deeper voice, steady, sovereign, sacred, rose within you and said, "Don't go back to where you had to beg to be seen." As right, so you didn't. You stayed still, and in that stillness, power gathered. You realized that silence is not absence, it's authority. Those who once dismissed you now wondered how you remained unshaken. They couldn't comprehend that what kept you steady wasn't arrogance, it was anointing. But the higher you rise, the more invisible the air becomes. Fewer people can breathe where you're going. That's why elevation feels like isolation. It's not that you're alone, it's that you've entered a frequency too rare for the masses. You began to see that your path wasn't punishment, it was preservation. You were being refined for responsibility, shaped for sacred influence. Because when heaven entrusts power, it tests character first. And in that testing, you found humility. You stopped needing to prove anything. You learned that real authority doesn't demand, it commands. Not through fear, but through frequency. One night, under a sky scattered with quiet stars, you whispered the words that sealed your becoming. I no longer chase purpose, I embody it. And the universe responded not with sound, but with movement. You could feel it, the alignment clicking into place, reality rearranging itself around your surrender. You finally understood that being chosen was never about superiority, it was about stewardship. You weren't called to be worshipped, you were called to awaken. So you began to move differently, with intention, with quiet fire. You no longer needed recognition, because the unseen already recognized you. You no longer needed to be validated, because creation itself responded to your vibration. And as the first light of dawn touched your skin, you realized that what you had feared all along, the loss, the solitude, the silence, had been your initiation. The breaking was never your ending. It was your anointing. So now, when you speak, the air listens. When you walk, the energy shifts. When you rest, the universe readjusts. You've become what you were always meant to be, evidence that divine alignment walks in human form. If this truth resonates in your spirit, hit like and subscribe. Not out of habit, but as agreement. You've survived the breaking. The unveiling is next. The chosen one. The night no longer frightens you. It welcomes you now, as if even the darkness has learned to bow before your light. You stand at the threshold of completion, not perfection, but alignment. The road behind you is scattered with fragments of who you once were. The road ahead is silent, sacred, unseen. You have learned to walk by vibration, not by vision. This is the stage no one prepares you for, the aftermath of awakening, the part where you've already survived the storm, but you still smell the rain. The thunder is gone, yet the echoes linger, whispering, "Remember what it took to get here." And you remember. You remember every betrayal that taught you discernment, every delay that strengthened your patience, every goodbye that disguised a blessing. You carry them all not as scars, but as scriptures written in your soul. You no longer seek signs in the sky. You have become the sign. Every step you take sends ripples through realities you cannot see. You don't manifest by asking anymore. You manifest by becoming. You breathe, and the universe responds. You speak, and frequency rearranges. That is what happens when purpose and power finally make peace inside you. But even now, there's a new test unfolding, not of endurance, but of embodiment. Heaven is watching to see if you will carry your light into the shadows without losing your warmth. Because being chosen was never about escaping darkness, it was about illuminating it. You look around and notice how people move differently around you now. Some approach with reverence, others with resistance. You used to take it personally. Now you understand that their reaction has nothing to do with your personality. It's about your presence. Your energy exposes what's unresolved in them, and the human ego doesn't like mirrors. You've become both comfort and confrontation, the kind of soul that makes people feel seen even when they don't want to be. Some will call it magic, others will call it mystery. But you know the truth. It's mastery, not learned from books or teachers, but earned through breaking, rebuilding, and becoming. Your glow no longer screams, it hums, quiet, steady, unshakable. You've stopped chasing love because you've become the frequency of it. You've stopped searching for peace because you now generate it. You don't compete for space anymore. You are the space-sacred ground where authenticity survives. And yet, the calling deepens. A new voice rises, not loud, but luminous. It whispers, "Now that you know who you are, what will you build?" You pause, because you understand what that question means. This is not about followers, fame, or fortune. It's about impact, about the unseen ripple your energy leaves long after you've walked away, about being the prayer your ancestors whispered into eternity. You think of them now, the ones who came before you, the ones who carried pain so that you could carry purpose. Their strength hums in your veins. Their unfinished stories breathe through your existence. You are not their continuation, you are their correction. The dream that broke every curse that dared to stop it. And in that realization, humility floods your heart. You finally see it clearly. Being chosen was never about being better. It was about being responsible. You were chosen to remind others of what's real, to awaken them to their own reflection of the divine. So you step forward, not with fear, but with reverence. Every movement now is intention. Every silence is instruction. Every breath, a bridge between worlds. You are no longer waiting for destiny. You are destiny unfolding. Still, there is a quiet ache inside you, a yearning that doesn't fade even in alignment. It's the longing of a soul that remembers eternity but walks in time. You've made peace with it. You know now that ache isn't emptiness, it's evidence of connection to something infinite. You are learning to carry heaven within human limitation, to live as a translation of light inside a fragile body. And that paradox no longer terrifies you, it completes you. The storms no longer shake you, the silence no longer scares you. You've learned that both are messengers of transformation, that every ending is just creation in disguise. So you rise again, this time not as survivor, but as sender. You are the message now. You are the miracle your pain was preparing for. And though the world may not yet understand it, every soul that meets yours will feel it. The vibration of someone who answered the call. Your story will not end with applause. It will end with awakening, echoing through those who hear your words, feel your energy, and remember their own power. You lift your eyes to the unseen and whisper softly, "I am ready." And for the first time, you don't mean ready to receive. You mean ready to become. The wind stirs as if heaven nods in agreement. The chapter closes, but the journey begins again, spiraling upward, infinite, divine. You are not the same. You never will be. You were not chosen to be comfortable. You were chosen to be catalytic. And now, the world will shift because you dared to answer. Write 333 inches the comments. It's not a number this time, it's a vow. A declaration that you are walking in your own divine alignment, fully awake, fully here. Because now, you are no longer waiting for light. You are the light.